Greetings and peace. I would like to start this with Bismillah ar-Rahman ar-Rahim, in the name of Allah, the Beneficent, the Most Merciful. And Assalamu alaikum wa rahmatullahi wa barakatuhu. Peace be with you and yours. I wanted to do today's presentation on the aspect of viewing the Holy Quran and Islam through the lens of Hermeticism and Astro-Theology or Astrology. I wanted to do this presentation since I will be taking a break on the channel till August or July 2025 upcoming. I know now we're in the month of April, so I hope you benefit from this. And as always, thank you for always sticking by me, and I represent myself only. Now, esoteric Islam refers to the inner mystical dimensions of Islamic teachings as interpreted through Hermetic principles such as astrology and alchemy. This spiritual perspective sees the Quran not only as a book of divine guidance, but also as a coded cosmic map through symbolic language, mystery letters, and archetypal themes. Esoteric Islam explores the elevation of the soul and its connection to universal truths. The Quran mentions abbreviated letters whose meaning is unknown, with opinions divided on this matter. Now, this is where the Haruf al-Muqattat comes in. Right, the mystery letters of the Quran. The 29 chapters of the Quran that mentions these prefixes use 12 characters in total, which correspond to the 12 astrological signs. The letter Aleph represents Aries, Lam represents Taurus, and Mim represents Gemini. The verses in each chapter with these letters discuss themes related to the astrological signs. For example, Aleph is associated with warfare, Lam with material wealth, and Mim with pilgrimage. Now, there is a correlation between these certain letters and the astrological signs. The letter Mim corresponds to the sign of Gemini, the letter Sad to Cancer, the letter Ra to Leo, the letter Kaf or Kaf to Virgo, and the letter Ha to Libra. And you have to see that, especially if you look at the symbolic meaning on how the Quran uses stories and metaphors to explain the attributes and behaviors associated with the astrological signs of Leo and Pisces. In reference to Leo, the Quran describes a city where people reject radical or revolutionary information due to their cultural values and formality. In reference to Pisces, the Quran tells a story about the consequences of selfishness and narrow-mindedness. It also rebukes rigid human attitudes and praises those who embrace good behavior. The Quran uses the metaphor of the sign of Pisces to represent Jonah and the deliverance from despair. And also the mystery letters Alif, Lam, Mim in Surah Al-Baqarah, is you have to look at their connection to Aries, Taurus, and Gemini, and how the attitudes and characteristics associated with each sign play a constructive role in what we view as Islamic astrology or Astro-Theology. Now, you have to look at what all of this is teaching on the concept of following the right direction, and how the Quran is teaching us to have better business activities and proper wealth distribution, how we have zakat in Islam to help the needy, and the importance of positive actions and adherence to the teachings of the Quran for the betterment of mankind. Spending wealth in the right way can lead to personal, social, and spiritual benefit. The Quran emphasizes the importance of spending for the cause of Allah and warns against vanity and hypocrisy. And it addresses conflicts caused by spiritual corruption. And also, you have to rise above destructive behaviors, right? And this is what all of this is basically teaching us, to not fall astray to the misuse of language or divisions and conflicts, and to contribute ourselves to proper spiritual growth. Wisdom in Islamic mysticism is seen as a divine catalyst for the evolution of human consciousness. It requires the seeker to transcend ego and vanity, embrace sacrifice, and align with universal truth. Drawing from these ancient traditions, as Islam, since the beginning of time, we believe that everything was Islam being revealed in stages, that perfect religion in submission to the will of God. So that Hermetic is a part of that revelation as well. Now, we view these teachings and view conscience as a sacred space where divine and demonic forces intersect, shaping the character through trials and inner reflection. Meaning that the good and evil, the concept of heaven and hell, even the Persian poet Omar Khayyam says that I myself am heaven and hell, and how angels, jinns, Qareens, right? All that is assigned to you throughout your human life. And Allah has given us all aql, the intellect, to know right from wrong with our free will. So it's our decision on how we want to move forward in this life and in our evolution. Now, the Quranic verses describe the zodiac in a symbolic way, with the arch-shaped vault of the sky represented by a mountain and the zodiac signs represented by an inscribed scripture on parchment. The zodiac signs and their characteristics are shown in these Quranic chapters that begin with mystery letters of the Alif Lam Mim. These letters represent the signs of the zodiac and their astrological properties. The transformation of man into a divine being, Insan al-Kamil, is depicted through this method. And it's just like in Hermeticism, right? As above, so below. And it's also in the story of Joseph, Prophet Joseph, and his trials, and the themes that are there of deception, temptation, and spiritual integrity. Joseph is sold as a slave and faces temptations from his employer's wife, which he resists. He is then falsely accused and imprisoned. While in prison, Joseph interprets dreams for two men and emphasizes the importance of worshiping Allah, the Creator, alone. And the importance, it's shown from the story of staying true to one's belief and the consequences of moral corruption. Joseph, who was unfairly imprisoned in Egypt, learned to discern between people based on their actions and intentions. He identifies his prison mates as people who were idol worshippers, who did the right things for the wrong reasons. Joseph sought a favor from one of them, but he forgot to help Joseph due to his selfishness. And later on, Joseph interpreted the dream of a man who was released from prison, advising the king to maintain a balance of resources to prevent conflicts. And this story here, it does provide much wisdom here, which can be parallel to Hermeticism. And there are various stories from the Quran that symbolically represent different zodiac signs and lessons for the chosen one. These stories include the signs of Aries and Libra, contending for 1% left in the creation of the world, Solomon forgetting his responsibilities and begetting many sons in a short period of time, Job enduring his afflictions and staying true to his noble purpose, and the creation of man with divine authority. And it's important that the significance of the cornerstone as a symbol of the solar eclipse and its importance to the different sacred traditions, including how in Islam the man is taught to be the cornerstone and become Insan al-Kamil. Solar eclipses occur when the sun and moon align at the lunar nodes, which move in retrograde opposite to the luminaries. The luminaries represent power and the nodes represent purpose, giving objective value to human existence. The power and purpose connect to the north and south nodes, respectively, and the rest of the planets connect to either power or purpose depending on their motion. Now, the Quranic chapter Al-Hijr discusses conflicts about wealth and community, warning that power must be aligned with purpose. And you got to look at the exploration of possibilities for human growth, and that it involves trials and errors, with the transformation of the earth into a gemstone being necessary for communication between angels and humans. And heavenly mansions are decoration pieces for the invisible, but powerful mansions of the zodiac signs emphasize the importance of human integrity over physical beauty. Now, you got to look at the symbolic phrase, potter's clay of black mud altered, in Quranic verses, which suggests that this phrase represents the malleability and the age of the material from which man is created. And also, you have to explore the theme of man as the cornerstone of God's creation and the struggle and self-sabotage that comes with this role. And you got to look at that. You have to trust God's will and know that you have to, as man, you are the vicegerent of God on this earth. The Haruf al-Muqattat are mysterious letter combinations that appear at the beginning of 29 chapters in the Quran. These 14 Arabic letters are considered esoteric keys, believed to contain hidden meanings known only to God or decipherable through spiritual insight. Esoteric interpretations connect them to the 12 signs of the Zodiac, linking Quranic structure with celestial wisdom. Now, looking at the Quran, you have to see the denial of messengers and the destruction of the dwellers in Surah Al-Hijr. And you also have to see the creation of the heavens and the earth and the coming of the hour, how we're seeing Surah Zalzala 99, how the earth is a living female entity and how she's rebelling against the inhabitants for the damage it has caused her through natural disasters and other stuff, which she is releasing her burdens, which shows the importance of unity and shows that basically we need communion and the law of symmetry and proportion and spiritual growth, that we as a Muslim people or the human race, the Ummah Muhammad, right? Everyone is part of the Ummah of Muhammad, peace be upon him. We must all be together. Now, chapter 41 of the Quran, Fusilat, discusses the communion and the law of symmetry and proportion. It offers detailed explanations to those who have knowledge, but like many ignorant people turn away from it. The chapter mentions the importance of charity for the communion and presents symbolic connections to the Sun, Jupiter, and Moon Saturn proportions. This chapter also mentions the destruction of the people of A'ad and Tamud, who defied the mind and body parts of the communion, respectively. And this chapter 41 of the Quran, Al-Fusilat, emphasizes the significance of the communion through various symbols. Animals have survival instincts for their own benefit, but camels serve humans in harsh conditions. The communion symbolizes humans serving the Lord like camels. Hills symbolize the communion of earth and heaven. Charitable conduct towards enemies is essential in the communion. Physical and mental talent should be used for spiritual growth. Growth requires hard work and constant application. Reality eventually reasserts itself and leads to ecstatic communion. Islam has that connection with those worlds and also the Hermetic teachings, and uses astrological symbolism. Islamic traditions and archetypal personalities are linked to astrology. The moon in astrology is similar to the Islamic ritual of Salat. Salat involves physical postures and regular intervals, similar to the phases and movements of the moon. The practice of Salat is accompanied by prayer and Quranic verses, creating an emotional connection to worship and community. Prophet Muhammad's association with the moon is seen in his regular midnight Salat and the event where he splitting of the moon. Fasting during Ramadan and Prophet Muhammad's fasting on Mondays align with the astrological association of Saturn. Imam Ali alayhi salam, his aesthetic lifestyle and fasting habits, as well as his association with the moon and the Kaaba, the black cube, further illustrates his connection with Saturn, and he was born inside that. Venus is associated with community and social justice, seen in the celebration of Fridays and the Hajj pilgrimage. Fatima, Prophet Muhammad's daughter, is associated with Venus and shown through her care for her children and title as a leader of women. Jupiter is seen as a symbol of hope and optimism. The Islamic tradition of zakat and the practice of almsgiving is closely associated with the astrological planet Jupiter. Hassan, the grandson of the Prophet, is also linked to the qualities of Jupiter. Similarly, the Islamic tradition of jihad and the martyrdom of Hussein are associated with the planet Mars. The planet Mercury is related to the Islamic ritual of wudu or tahara, which emphasizes cleanliness and purity before prayer, ablution. The Archangel Gabriel, the astrological function of the sun, the Islamic tradition of Tawaf, and the concept of Imam or leader in Islam all have connections to spiritual teachings and practices. These teachings revolve around the ideas of divine revelation, the center of existence, the motion of planets, and self-empowerment. The Trinity formula found in ancient cultures is also present in the Abrahamic cultures as well. Now, if you look at it, the Trinity formula of the Father, Son, and Holy Spirit is shown in these aspects too, where Islam has the Prophet Muhammad and the Ahlul Bayt, Imam Ali alayhi salam, Hazrat Fatima alayhi salam, and how all of this stuff is basically connected together. And it shows that all of these things have to be looked at in our, basically to prioritize spiritual growth over worldly desires. That's the whole aim of understanding all of these concepts and teachings. Aries, the first zodiac sign, symbolizes initiation, action, and courage. The Arabic letter Alif appears in Surah Al-Baqarah, correlating with the call to spiritual and physical struggle. The Quran uses it to introduce the concept of warfare as a divine responsibility, echoing Aries' archetypal energy of protective leadership. Now, if you look at the 8 points of the Maltese cross, symbolizes the aspirations of the Order of the Knights of Malta, which corresponds to the cardinal and fixed signs in astrology. The active and passive principles can be understood from verses in the Quran that talk about the dawn, the even, and the odd, and the night of power. The Quran emphasizes the importance of both active and passive forces in spirituality and gender roles. And it also mentions punishments for violating these principles, such as scourging and restrictions on marriage. And also Saturn, also known as the Beneficent One, is mentioned in the Quran and has symbolic influence and significance. The chapter Az-Zukhruf talks about the opposition faced by the Beneficent One and its association with Saturn. Saturn represents rebellion and brings about positive changes. And this chapter basically, Az-Zukhruf, also mentions the cultural reform needed in Arabia and criticizes the mocking of the Beneficent One. The pagan Arabs tried to associate the Beneficent One with weaker gender roles and disliked the birth of female children. And the chapter questions their beliefs and actions. Pagan Arabs resisted reforms and worshipped images of angels, associating their behavior with the Beneficent One. They rejected guidance and followed their ancestors' religion. The poor and suppressed were more open to reforms. Material abundance can lead to stagnancy and despotic culture. Tyrannical elites were ignored power of the Beneficent One and got beguiled by sycophants. This chapter also discusses the cultural domination of parents in society, as well as the oppressive political domination. Psychological domination and enmity were also present, and the Prophet Muhammad faced diatribe from pagan Arabs regarding Jesus. The Quran discusses the controversy surrounding Jesus being the Son of God, rejecting the concept of God as a father king with an heir. And it argues that Jesus is a follower of the Beneficent One rather than the son of a king. And you have to explore the idea of human destiny and the impact of time and death, and the Hermetic principle of polarities and the interactions of elements in nature. Now, if you look at it, Jesus is basically a prophet of God. And in Islam, all of the stories is in alignment with the virgin birth, miracles, second coming, except where Jesus is a prophet of God. And he was ascended into heaven. He was never killed, because how would God forsake him, you know? And if you look in the book of Matthew, he fell down on his face and prayed. He greeted everyone with peace be upon you, and all of those stuff where he never asked anyone to worship him. And the true living God, like it says in Surah Al-Ikhlas, that he neither begets nor is begotten, that he's neither born nor does he die, and only the face of your Lord will remain. And he doesn't have a wife or children. It's just that one universal truth, Al-Haq, which existed in the beginning, and in the end. Now, in this teaching of Astro-Theology in the Quran, right, the discussion is there on the idea that the judgment of proportions between elements like water, earth, fire, and air can support the formation and existence of life on Earth. Saturn is identified as the planet responsible for this judgment, as opposed to other planets like Venus, Mars, Mercury, Jupiter, Sun, or the Moon. And how, like, basically the exploration how different zodiac signs and their ruling planets can purify or corrupt each other based on their proximity and angular relationship. And also that the luminaries Sun and Moon, ruled by Saturn, cannot be redeemed if they become corrupted. Now, the symbolic representation of Saturn as the Lord of the Day of Judgment is also shown in various religious texts as well. And also the discussion of the archetypal nature of elements and how they interact with each other, on how everything revolves around this Day of Judgment. And the Quran suggests that on the Day of Judgment, humanity will be divided into 3 groups based on their spiritual merits or judgments. The physical bodies we possess do not reflect our true moral principles, which will only become evident on the Day of Judgment. The Quran also mentions the principle of polarity and separation as a means of purification, and highlights the importance of quality over quantity. Taurus, linked with the letter Lam, embodies abundance, stability, and attachment. Surah Al-Baqarah's the cow narrative aligns with Taurus, symbolic bull, addressing materialism and spiritual detachment. Moses and the golden calf story critiques blind devotion to material wealth. Now the verses from the Holy Quran, Surah 91, verses 1 through 10, chapter 91, verses 1 through 10, suggest that success comes from causing growth and failure comes from stifling it. Now, you have to look at the esoteric meaning of Surah Ar-Rahman, the Beneficent, in the Quran, highlighting the symbolism of Saturn and the concept of limits and polarity. And it also delves into the relationship dynamics between humans and jinn, intelligent spirit beings whose essence of creation is energy. Matter is the condensed form of energy, while the sublimated form of the matter is the jinn. The jinn population is always greater than the human population, and they can appear in human form. The digestive system of jinn extracts material and discards energy. Men and women may only support each other as mediums for the invocation of jinn. Children born with humans have a connection with the jinn, while children of human origin are transferred to the dominion of jinn. Jinn prefer to live under the earth. Jinn and humans have a preference for each other based on energy levels. Occult societies use sex rituals to influence the jinn. Now, Surah 55, chapter 55 of the Quran, discusses the concepts of limiting parameters, polarity, and divine authority, using examples such as the sun and the moon, the stars and the trees, and the earth's creatures. Man is made of clay and jinn are made of smokeless fire. The chapter also discusses the seasons and the principles of polarity, using examples such as the 2 seas and the pearl and coral stone. Now, the further discussion is there on the various metaphors and symbolism related to the relationship dynamics between man and jinn and the rewards and punishments from the divine countenance. Now, the verses basically in these chapters that are mentioned of the Quran highlight the need for morality and adherence to true notions of morality in order to avoid punishments. And you have to look at the positive aspects and rewards of goodness in the forms of gardens, fruits, and beautiful companions in Jannah. Now, you have to look at the interpretation of the 53rd chapter of the Quran called the Star, Surah 53. This chapter is said to contain guidelines for navigating through the 12 signs of the Zodiac and encompasses the teachings of Islam. It is divided into sections corresponding to each Zodiac sign, as explaining their symbolism and significance. And you have to have the importance of following divine law and wisdom. While the divine name and countenance are just modes of communication, And you have to look at the discussion of the imbalance between the punishment and reward portions of the chapter, and verse from the Quran emphasizing equality among humans. Now, you have to look at that each sign is shown and how it's all connected to that true divine origin. It's what I've covered in the Ibn Arabi video, right? Time and cosmology, how everything is basically in that single monad model, right? Everything returning to the source. Now, if you look at flux, which is a Hermetic principles that drives the spiritual existence of humanity, it is associated with the physical characteristics of the elements and their expressions in human lives. The chapter 54 of the Quran explores the doctrine of flux and its value and power in human existence, and also the relationship between doctrine and authority, and the influence of astrological signs is tied into all of this. And the emphasis is there on the importance of following the doctrine of flux in various aspects of life, and there are consequences if its principles are ignored. Now, if you look at how basically we're all supposed to come together as one human family, that is the ultimate truth. Equality among all humans. What the Prophet Muhammad did with the Charter of Medina gave rights to all beings who were being persecuted by the pagan tribes at the time, and how we're all told to be the Ummah of Muhammad. Gemini is symbolized by the twins, duality and communication. The letter Meme represents language and storytelling. Surah Al-Baqarah critiques hypocrisy and duplicity, warning against misuse of speech and encouraging truthful dialogue. This reflects Gemini's intellect and its potential for misguidance. Now, Moses travels to reach the domain of Pisces. He meets Al-Qidr, the immortal green prophet who represents Pisces, and asks to learn from him. Al-Qidr warns Moses that he may not have the patience to understand. And they embark on a ship, and Al-Qidr tears it open, causing Moses to question his actions. Al-Qidr reminds Moses of their agreement and continues to teach him through his actions. Now, if you look at the significance of the ship, what Al-Qidr did, killing the boy at the beach, the repairing of a wall, and the meaning behind these actions, you have to explore the concept of the cardinal cross of the Zodiac and present the story of the companions of the cave as like an allegorical aspect on how all of this is taking place, that everything has like a deeper meaning and symbolism behind it. Whether it's in Islam, where man is considered God's representative on earth, the vicegerent, and is expected to obey the divine guidance. The companions of the cave are awakened to their higher selves and submit to the authority of heaven. They find harmony, order, and peace in the cave, representing the Zodiac. The movement of the sun around the cave indicates their reality. The companions question each other about the duration of their sleep, showing that submission to the truth transcends time. One companion is sent to fetch provisions, highlighting the vanity of material pursuits. The miraculous nature of the companions becomes known to the people of the city, who dispute among themselves. The Quran rejects their counting of the companions and hints at the possibility of invisible planets. Man should always seek guidance from heaven in his affairs. The companions stay in the cave for 300 years, exceeding the lunar calendar by 9 years. Reading Surah Al-Kahf on Fridays, the cave, is believed to bring blessings and light to Muslims. According to the narration of the Prophet Muhammad, the heroes mentioned in the chapter correspond to astrological signs ruled by Venus and Pisces, which explains the positive influence of reading the chapter on Fridays. The chapter also offers guidance on reaching a state of perfection through spiritual practices. It emphasizes the power to overcome challenges and the importance of continuing rituals to maintain that power. Addictive and self-destructive practices are seen as forms of slavery and damnation, while good practices lead to ascension and revelations. The chapter also references the legacy of power inherited by the children of Israel through Moses, symbolized by the Zodiac and surviving darkness. Now, you have to look at the significance of the number 7 in Islamic teachings. And if you look on how divine attributes and the importance of understanding the divine attributes and engaging in rituals of spiritual significance to reflect one's sublime character. And you have to use this knowledge in various situations to the best of your ability with a cool, calm attitude, and how the Quran utilizes Hermetic metaphors to represent the epitome of human consciousness and its potential for goodness. The concept of the 7 heavens symbolizes the orbits of the astrological planets, while the throne, the Arsh, represents the ecliptic of zodiac signs. The Quran also contains the sepentary arrangements in its structure, with 7 chapters beginning with the Haruf al-Muqattat of Ha-Mim. Each of these chapters expresses a planetary archetype and a message of justice. Other chapters represent the qualities of other planets, such as knowledge and philosophy, which is Jupiter, communication and technology, which is Mercury, wisdom and intelligence, which is the Sun. The chapter Smoke in the Quran represents the illusions of physical appearances, the Moon, and the concept of warnings. Cancer, ruled by the Moon, is tied to emotion and divine leadership. The letter Sa'd appears in verses about King David, highlighting justice and humility. The Cancerian archetype represents nurturing leadership, guided by emotions and inner ethics. Now, you have to look at the concept that humans, unlike animals, should not be tied to territorial attachments because we are immortal souls, and how God has given us this earth as his representatives, the vicegerents, and how we must follow these commandments. If you look at the story of Queen Sheba and how she failed the test given by Solomon, which suggests that decadence and lifestyles can cause even monarchs to lose touch with reality, and how we see astrology represented in the stories of Noah, Abraham, Lot, Lut, and the people of Midian. And you have to see that you have to emphasize the importance of finding balance and harmony between different elements to achieve true peace and avoid destructive behavior. Now, chapter 57 of the Quran, Al-Hadid, is shown the mystical aspects of the art of war, the iron. The Hermetic teachings can help minimize the negative consequences of human endeavors and contribute to a more noble culture. And that's what the Prophet Muhammad said. He said, I have come to perfect the character of mankind, the adab. The Hermetic war zone is basically described as the interaction between the astrological signs of light and dark, with the signs of Aries, Taurus, and Virgo representing strength, wealth, and logic, while Libra, Scorpio, and Pisces representing wisdom, power, and compassion. Now, you have to achieve harmony between these signs. It's crucial for that successful war within and outside of you. And, of course, that struggle between light and dark and fighting for higher ideals and the internal nature of the warrior's cause. Now, you have to look at the concept of war and its potential benefits, as well as the symbolism of iron and its representation of Mars and the human contribution to the divine plan. If you look at the 4 quls, right, the 4 quls are like prayers from the Holy Quran, powerful protection spells in the Quran and their astrological and psychological significance. The mind control and the influence that we're seeing in today's society, we must break away from this and become better human beings. And you have to know that there's always a war, inner and outer, and you must fight that inner war and become good so you can project that into the outer realm as well. Leo is royal, solar, and visionary. The letter Ra shines in the story of the prophet Joseph, whose dreams, charisma, and leadership mirrors Leo's divine favor and brilliance. Joseph's journey reflects Leo's rise from darkness to radiance. The Hermetic philosophy states that language reflects consciousness and cosmic influences determine the existence of verbal expressions. The Quran's value is not assessed by quantity, but by quality. The language of a person represents their state of consciousness. The tree of life represents equilibrium, harmony, and peace. The tree of loss represents disparity and falling from grace. Language is important for creating a harmonious society, and Allah's words will vindicate the truth. Animals symbolize actions, and their actions qualify the mind. In order to gain true power according to the Quran, humans must recognize the universe as a whole and integrate the forces of nature for a harmonious existence. The distinction between actions of production and consumption should be understood, as well as the adaptation of animals to different seasonal challenges. The story of Prophet Ibrahim metaphorically symbolizes the possibility of seasonal adaptation and adaptation. The ambitions for power have caused trouble in history, and how we're seeing that today. And basically that we have to exercise divine power and the potential for humans to acquire extensive capabilities through guidance and positive intentions, and using this power for noble purposes, and not to be lazy or fall into stupidity or anything else. Now, we need to utilize these talents and actions as manifestations of this divine power, and how even the Sufi teachings and Quranic teachings tell us that if humans really recognize their power, then mountains would move at our supplications, because we are the highest ranking creature, not only in this world, but in the universe after God. You got to know who you are. And even in Ibn Arabi's, right, the Fusus al-Hikam, in the first chapter of Adam, on how all of those attributes of God were placed in the human being, and how all the beings of existence had to bow before Adam. So know who you are, know your power, know thyself. Virgo, represented by Kaf or Kaf, symbolizes purity and divine order. The story of Mary illustrates Virgo's archetype, immaculate and receptive to divine will. Her spiritual journey represents the Hermetic cross of spiritual birth through service and insight, and how even in Islam, one of the miracles of Prophet Isa, Jesus, peace be upon him, son of Mary, is that as a baby, he protected his mother when she was being slandered, and spoke up and defended her honor. Sagittarius is the seeker and philosopher. The letter Ain appears in Ishmael's narrative, reflecting vision, divine favor, and spiritual expansion. Ishmael's story symbolizes the Sagittarian journey towards enlightenment. And I'm sure you've seen that people who have come from a Sagittarius background, they are truly like that. Aquarius is the outcast and visionary. The letter Sin connects to the prophets rejected for their message. These reformers, like Aquarians, challenge norms and offer wisdom from hidden realms, seeking societal transformation. Pisces is the mystic and the healer. The letter Nun appears in stories of transformation and divine return, and these narratives highlight compassion, intuition, and the soul's journey back to divine unity. Thank you for watching. I hope you all benefited from this. And there's an amazing book on this subject called Esoteric Islam, on viewing Islam through the lens of Hermeticism and Astro-Theology, written by Satchel Smith or Sackle Smith. Please excuse me if I'm not pronouncing that correctly. I'll put the link in the description below, as that is the only basically book out there that's been written on this subject. It's on Amazon in Kindle version, so please support this author who's contributing to this great cause as well. And thank you all for watching. If any questions, please email me at salmanshake911@gmail.com. All images used were retrieved from public domain searches and are the rightful property of their respective owners. The images used in this video are for the purpose of nonprofit awareness and education, which is protected by the copyright laws of fair use, education purpose. All my videos are for nonprofit and education purposes. Thank you, all rights reserved.